Of client-side load balancing and failover. Normally in RAC you would configure that your client should connect using the scan IP. Okay, so the scan name would return any one of the three scan IPs, and the client would not know in advance which scan IP and which host it is connecting to in the cluster. You can explicitly configure the individual scan IPs. Okay, so the client can pick the scan IP is based on load balancing rule at the client side. So the first connection might connect to 94, second connection or third connection of the same client might connect to 95, the sixth or seventh connection might connect to IP96. And you can also configure failover from the client side. So you can configure based on the three scan IPs. You can also configure based on the server VIPs. Remember, in a RAC cluster, besides the scan IPs, you also have VIPs for each of the servers. So you can configure connectivity with load balancing and failover based on the server VIPs. On the server side, the way you configure the service, I'll just show you that. I've covered this in a different blog post also before. So when you create a service in a cluster, you should not be using the default service name for the PDB. You should manually create a service. So this is how I configure my service, my PDB. It can connect to either of the two instances. So its cardinality is 2. It's connecting to a primary database, not a standby database. Okay, so these are both the preferred instances. So you can connect on either of the two instances. You can define a service which will connect only to one instance as primary, and if that primary is down, to connect to the second instance as the available instance. But normally you would configure most services as preferred to all the nodes or preferred to a set of nodes in your cluster. So this is how you would have configured your custom service on the cluster side. And normally you would say all clients will connect using the scan IP or the scan name, but you can define client side TNSNAMES.ORA with 3 different scan addresses or with the server VIPs. So I'm going to show you a connection using the server VIP. Okay, so I've connected. Now I have a query which I can show you. Okay, so this is the actual query. I'm getting the instance name, I'm getting the host name, the failover type. So remember, in my client side I've configured failover and load balancing, but even on the server side also, when you define your service, you can specify the failover type when you create a service. So in the $$ session view, you can see what is the failover type for your current connection, failover method. Now remember, basically failover supports only select queries, not DML in flight. Okay, so DML in flight may require application continuity. Transparent application failover is only for select queries. Application continuity will support DML if you have properly configured it. Now you can see in this case, I tried to connect to something called the VIPs, and the first VIP is server 1 and the second VIP address is server 2, but here it seems because of load balancing rule it has decided to connect to server 2. Maybe if I open another connection, okay, so this is a different connection, not reusing the same connection. I'm creating a new SQL Plus session, and then I'm going to run the same query to find out which session I'm connected to. Just run it from here. So it's again connected to server 2, which is fine. Let me open a third connection. So you can see the client in this case is a single SQL plus client, so it is not monitoring how many connections I am opening, but by default it is connected to server 2 because it has picked server 2 out of these two server VIPs. Now next I'm going to show you a failover for running session. So let me just grab the SMONs because I'm going to show the SMON being the server instance being killed, and then what happens to the client session. Okay, I'm connected to server 2, so to simulate instance failure I'll be killing this process, this SMON, but I'll be killing that only after I've started my query session. I'll just take okay, if you did notice a discrepancy with the logon time and the time shown here is because this time is my local time zone, but the logon time is the UTC. Okay, so you'll see an 8-hour difference, which is fine. So I'm going to run a query on the large table about 15,000 rows, and as soon as the query starts I'm going to kill the SMON process for server 2. Okay, oops, sorry. Okay, so I was querying about 15,000 rows and the query continued running. Let me see where I'm connected to now. If you notice, earlier I was on server 2. I don't know if I can scroll back 15,000 rows, but yeah, I was on server 2 earlier. Okay, so you can see the failover has changed to yes. My session has failed over, and you can see the logon time has also changed. It has just reconnected to the instance. There's a slight discrepancy between my PC clock time and the server clock time, which is okay, but you can see the session has actually failed over from server 2 to server 1 while the query was running. So the query actually got disconnected and reconnected to server 1 because of the way I have configured my TNSNAMES.ORA. I was initially connected to server 2 VIP. I started the query, the server 2 instance went down, and the query continued running on server 1. So that's the failover feature that you can configure from the client side. Okay, you can have failover feature configured from the server side as well when you create your service. So you can say failover is select and transparent encryption policy is basic, and that's what you see here. Same from the client side also, you will see that your $V session will tell you what type of connection you have and whether failover is configured or not. So my failover type is select, failover method is basic, and I have failed over. Let me just disconnect from this one. Okay, so remember I've returned to the previous session that was also on server 2, and that also got reconnected to server 1. I'll just run the query which shows me the timestamp, and that got reconnected to server 1 at 14. See, this was 1409, and the other session that I had got reconnected to server 1 from server 2 at 1410. That means when I made the next call to the database instance, it found that server 2 had died and it got reconnected to server 1. So let me just close all of these sessions. I'm connected to the first instance, the first database session, that also got reconnected at 1411, and now it has reconnected. It has reconnected to server 2 again because my server 2 instance is also automatically started off. Maybe I can show you. Okay, so I had 3 sessions connected to server 2. The first 2 sessions failed over from server 2 to server 1, and the third session, by the time I started checking, it has failed back to server 2 again because my server 2 instance has also been restarted automatically. You can see for server 2 was at 1358 and then it got restarted at 1409. This restart is done by the grid infrastructure, that is the cluster aware. So whenever you want to verify that if your client session has failed over, you look at your failed over column in $V session. Okay, so I'm going to close this. I don't have any more sessions. I'll just open another one. Okay, so uh, I can show you based on the scan as well. Okay, so based on the scan, I'm connected to server 1 right now. So I'm going to start the same query again. Okay, I'll just run there. Get. And while the query is running, I will kill server 1. I will kill the instance on server 1. You can see it has paused a bit. Okay, and then it has failed over. There was a slight pause in between when it detected that the server 1 instance had gone down. It reconnected to server 2, or it reconnected to whatever was defined based on my connect string as the available failover instance. So if I were to check my session failover, now you can see I have failed over from server 1 to server 2. So although you can define client server side failover using services, and that is the proper way in Oracle RAC, you use scan and you also configure server side failover when you create a service. Okay, but you can also define client side failovers you based on the scan, but with the scan you don't know which scan is running on which server. If you have a 4 node 5 node cluster, you don't even know which scan is running on which server. So the alternative is and this is the method we used to implement pre-scan days in 10G and 9i. You define your connection failover based on the server VIPs rather than on the scan IPs.